Everybody, we're so glad that you're here. My name is Rachel Bryce, and I'm the program coordinator with Land for Good, here to welcome you to this three-part webinar series, Make Your Land Available for Farming, hosted by the New England FarmLink Collaborative. And as I'm introducing people, if one of my co-hosts could continue to admit folks who come into the waiting room now that we're getting started. Just to let everyone know, we are recording this session and we'll be posting it on our public YouTube channel as well as some of our other web outlets so that it's publicly available. If you would feel more comfortable not having your name shown on the recording, you can change your name on the Zoom screen, and you can also close your video. And so in that way, if you're worried about anonymity, you can take care of it in that way. So we're really glad that you're here today. We're looking forward to spending the next hour with you. This webinar series is part of the Land for Farmers project, which is supported by the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program grant from the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And it's presented to you by the New England FarmLink Collaborative. That's a collaboration of a number of different FarmLink programs throughout New England, from Connecticut, Maine, Vermont, and then NEF, or New England Farm Finder, which deals with properties and finders all over New England. And I just really want to center our conversation today by acknowledging that the history of colonialism and slavery that has allowed us to occupy the land that we currently call New England and the United States was essentially based on 1.5 billion acres of land that was stolen from indigenous nations between 1776 and 1887. A lot of that land was stolen either by executive order or treaty under duress, and particularly in New England, a lot of the territory here, it was officially unceded, meaning there was no treaty. And so consequences of this legacy are still in effect today. I'm talking to you from what is now known as Walpole, New Hampshire, which is part of the traditional and current Abenaki homelands. We also wanted to acknowledge that 99% of land in the Northeast is owned by white people, and this is not an accident. It's a direct legacy of that colonial history that I previously mentioned, and also of purposeful government policies and practices that continue to perpetuate systemic racism to this day. And so our dominant food and farming system, as well as the institutions that govern them, are steeped in these histories of racism, exploitation, and oppression, and remain highly inequitable. And so one of the things that means is that farmers who don't fit the sort of traditional stereotype of an American farmer because of things such as age, race and ethnicity, gender, sex, many other aspects, might face additional challenges or additional significant barriers to access to land. And of course, we're speaking only through our own experience, through our learning with others, and we welcome other viewpoints that and acknowledge that other people may be experiencing things differently or see things differently than we do. And so that's my welcome for you today. We're really glad you're here. Please feel free to pop questions in the chat as you have them. And I'm going to turn things over now to Maddie.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was a great introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Maddie Dress. I am the FarmLink coordinator at Connecticut Farmland Trust here in Connecticut. So our FarmLink program works specifically in Connecticut, but as she said, we work as a collaborative to make sure that all farmers are served in New England and landowners. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. So today we're going to be talking about an introduction to posting your land on FarmLink. So I have a couple of questions. If you guys have a second to answer them in the chat, that would be great. What state are you guys all located in? Are you looking to sell or lease your property? And are you a farming or non-farming landowner? So this will just help to make sure we can cater our conversation to you guys today. And as you're leaving that stuff in the chat, I'll give you a brief introduction to me. My name is Maddie. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and went to school at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and studied sustainable agriculture. I graduated last spring and then got this job at Connecticut Farmland Trust as the FarmLink coordinator. I help farmers every day to try to find land, but me, myself, I also am an aspiring farmer and hope to one day have sheep. So this project is important to me because I also one day am hoping to find land either to lease or buy. So yeah, that's an introduction to me. And what are we going to be talking about today? So today we're going to be talking about why you need to make your land available or why you would want to. Is there a next generation of farmers? What are some incentives for landowners to offer their land to farmers? What are farmers looking for? How do I market what I have to offer? What should I know before posting? And then at the end, we'll offer some time for you guys to ask some questions and have a little discussion if you guys have questions. So during the presentation, if you do have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. Rachel will be tracking that and we will get to them towards the end. Sue?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Lamper. I am the Maine FarmLink coordinator. I work at Maine Farmland Trust. I have been there. This is my 15th year working as the FarmLink coordinator. So that's been really exciting. Watched a lot of land transactions happen over the years. And so working with this collaborative in New England has been very informative, and we really like working for both the landowners and the land seekers and doing everything we can do to help. So today I am going to talk a little bit about why it's important to make your farmland available. I feel like that's kind of a no-brainer. Having land available for the next generation so that they have land available to grow their nutritious food for their next generation coming up behind them. Making sure that the land gets used is one way that Maine Farmland Trust looks at it as a way of protecting farmland. Our main focus has been protecting farmland with agricultural easements, but not all pieces of property might be a good fit for an agricultural easement. And so just having your land be able to be advertised for a farmer who is looking to come onto a piece of land, we are looking at that as a way to protect the property so that it's not going to be sold off and developed into apartments or a strip mall, a parking lot, whatever the situation might be. So keeping your land active and maintained for farming, that is something that is extremely important. Keeping the land open is another thing that's, very important. Seeing that the land gets rejuvenated and that it's not going to get grown up into, scrub brush or just completely into woods. That's another important reason. The sooner it gets used and the more it gets used, the more nutritious it's going to be for the next generation of, ag growers. Another important thing would be revenue for your town. Having a new farmer come onto a piece of property might start a small business that wasn't there before. It could be something as simple as a farm stand. Perhaps maybe they're just going to do growing and they're going to sell at a local farmer's market. It might be able to connect them with other farmers in the area, and they might be able to collaborate on more businesses. So it's just going to bring more revenue to the town. Posting your property with one of the FarmLink programs would also be able to focus more on an audience that is looking for ag land versus the conventional real estate market, where you're just basically going to be finding people who are looking to just purchase a piece of property, whether it has a home, barns, buildings, whatever. They may not be looking to grow and getting food produced on the property like somebody that's in our program who's going to be looking for that specific type of property that you probably hopefully have. a couple of things to note with the different programs throughout our New England states that collaborate. The number of people who are in the programs might differ. Different programs use different avenues for having the program participants be a part of the program. So I'm going to use mine as an example. So in Maine, we have the landowners who actually post their properties, whether they're for sale, for lease, for partnership. But we also have a place for the farm seekers who can post their profiles. And so landowners who are not enrolled in our program, they are able to look through the seeker profiles and see who out there is looking for a particular piece of property. They might say, hey, I have what these farm seekers are looking for, and they can reach out to them. That does not mean those are the only people who are using our program. We have thousands of farm seekers who look at our website, even though they're not necessarily joined up and have their profile on our website. So just knowing the difference in different programs, you know, I don't believe Maddie's in Connecticut has a place for farm seekers to put their profiles.
We do have farm seekers.
You do? Okay, yeah.
It's NEF, and so NEF is the program that covers Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island, and they just have opportunities for farmers to post.
Owners, right,
Yep.
Right. So there's a little bit of difference in the variance in the program. So depending on the state you're in, where you would be posting the farm opportunity, just know that the people are out there. They are looking, and there are lots of them.
Yes, I'll just add, you talked a little bit about revenue and
Mhm.
adding, local economies to towns. Another benefit of posting your farmland is just to introduce local foods. This can mitigate climate change issues and provide people with other places to buy food, which is a great opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to incentives for having you lease your property, just tax benefit. You could have a piece of property that you yourself might not be able to farm in one way or another, but you can have a farm seeker come on and they can help you cover the cost of your taxes and your insurance for the property. And it's a win-win situation. They can help manage the property. They can even, so far as if you offer an incentive to them to reclaim the property back to the way it was and be in a more productive situation, you could offer them a lease where the first, 3 years, you give them a break on their lease. And then once you've the seekers put a little sweat equity into it, you can go back, redraw up your lease and move on from there. So you can have somebody work on your land, bring it back into production. It can also help the seeker and give them a leg up on an affordable piece of farmland. They may have to put a little extra work, but they can do the work for you. So it's a win-win.
Yep. There's also a lot of variability in leasing agreements. A lot of farm agriculture leases are handshake agreements. We recommend that you have at least a written lease of some kind with whoever it is that you match with on a FarmLink website. But there's a lot of variability that you can put into that to make sure, if you're worried about the soil health on your property, that they're, farming organically or at least sustainably to make sure that they're not damaging your soil. So keep that in mind when you find someone. Make sure you're finding someone that is going to further the goals that you have for your property. If you're looking to lease, that's definitely a possibility. And sometimes you just have to be patient to find that right person. But just last week in Connecticut, there was a match made between a landowner and a farmer, and both of them had been on the FarmLink website for 2 years. And finally, it was a great match and they sold the property, and now the stewardship got passed on to a new beginning farmer and his family. So sometimes it does just take time. And I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, Maddie. Thank you. The other thing, Land for Good, which is the organization that works, in farmland access, they have an awesome website and it's an entire leasing toolbox. And it's a great place. I recommend people go there every day. it's for both sides of the coin. You, as someone who is looking to lease out your property, you can go on and look at some sample leases. It will give you some ideas, probably bring up things you didn't even think about. On the flip side, it will give the seekers, the ones who are coming onto the land, they may not think about how to cover their tracks as far as leasing a piece of property. When we say go on and look at the leasing toolbox and look at all those leasing samples, we always encourage both sides to seek legal counsel in covering themselves. This is a legal agreement. We see handshake deals every day. We also see handshake deals go sour every day. So we like to cover our tracks, encourage people to have some type of an agreement in writing, looked at by someone who has the legal authority to give you advice on it, and then go from there.
Sue or Maddie, there's a question in the chat about typical lease duration. So especially if a landowner is interested in incentivizing or encouraging a farmer to use more sustainable techniques, including permaculture, which can take time to get started, how might a landowner think about a lease term in that case?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you, Tom. You know, with short-term leases, it is really hard to incentivize the farmers to invest in the property and invest in their operation on your property. Permaculture is, you know, a great example of why you would need to have a longer lease. Permaculture is meant to last forever and create an agriculture system that will be around for generations to come. Anywhere from, you know, I've heard of 50-year leases to 100-year leases and beyond that. So there's really, there's no length that is too much. You could set up a lease for the next 500 years if you felt like that person, the farmer that you're interested in, has a next generation that's interested in farming the property. But there is a couple farms here in Connecticut that have 50 to 100-year leases. And it's just a farmer that's really invested in making sure that the farmer that's leasing the property can really invest in the property.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Maddie, for that. Are you ready to move on to your next slide, Maddie?
Yeah, so I saw in the chat that quite a few of you are non-farming landowners. For the farming landowners, you might have more of an idea of what it is that farmers are looking for. So, but we're going to go into this a little bit. So what are farmers looking for? For one, productive soils. They need good soils to grow pasture land or to grow their crops. So knowing what soils you have on your property is a really important first step. Enough acres to sustain their production. For example, I have someone currently that's looking for half an acre in Connecticut, in a very specific area, obviously he's looking at, but anywhere from half an acre to 100 acres to more is what farmers are looking for to sustain their production. So there's no property that's too small, really. Appropriate infrastructure, so fencing, water, pumps for wells, etc. Housing, there's a really big housing crisis, especially in rural areas. It's really difficult for farmers to find housing close to farms that is affordable. So having housing or a housing opportunity on the property is very helpful for farmers. And location to markets. So this could include slaughterhouses if they're growing, you know, beef, or you know, farmers markets if they're growing vegetables, but just knowing what's in your proximity for these farmers to help support them. And, you know, knowing what kind of agriculture community is around, being really aware to make sure that this farmer has the support that they're going to need to succeed in your location. So those are just a couple of things to think about. There's obviously more, but I won't stress you out too much. This slide might stress you out a little bit more, but yeah, so soils and acreage. Before you make a posting, there's a tool called Web Soil Survey that you can go in and type your address. There's lots of tools online on how to use it. It's a pretty complex tool when you first glance at it, but don't be discouraged. There's YouTube videos and tutorials of how to make really easy maps to check what the soils are on your property, which is by the USDA and is really, really helpful. So I would really recommend making a soil map of your property before listing, just so you know what kind of soils are on the property. Understanding if you have a well or a stream or a pond that's going to provide water for the farmer, and also knowing if your pump is working, etc. If there's any contaminants in the water. And then a lot of issues come about when we start talking about fencing. New and beginning farmers don't always have the infrastructure like fencing. A farmer that's transferring onto your property from another lease situation may have fencing. So just knowing what it is that you have to offer and what it is you're looking for the farmer to bring to the table is important. But new and beginning farmers that aren't coming from a previous lease may need help initially with fencing, and that's something that you can add into your leasing agreement. Being aware of zoning and regulations. Make sure you're aware of your town's zoning laws, very important. And we have lots of resources on all of our websites that point to, local zoning laws. And then insurance. We also recommend that landowners and the leasee carry their own liability insurance just to cover, to make sure if anything happens, if there's livestock involved, farming can be dangerous if there's tractors involved, just to make sure that everything's covered if there's any issues that arise.
Find my mute button there. Thanks, Maddie. That was great information. The more you know, I always encourage my landowners, the more you know, the better. The more you are able to gain the information about your property, things you may not have known before, like the soils types and how many gallons per minute, or the zoning. You may not need to know necessarily, but the farmer coming in might need to know what the zoning laws are. Some towns don't allow chickens within so many feet of town line. So yeah.
It looks like there's a question in the chat about good sources of funding for fencing. Linda, that's a great question. Each state has different grant opportunities. I don't know what state you're located in. I know in Connecticut we have farmland restoration grants and other small micro grants that we recommend to young farmers or people looking to invest in infrastructure like fencing. In Massachusetts. We will email some information to you about that after the recording though, for sure.
Great. So moving on to what to expect once you have gathered all your information about your property, you have filled out the application, we have worked with you from our respective program, whether it's Maine, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New England Farmland Finder. We've drawn up the information, we have posted it out there. Now what's going to happen? Well, you're probably going to expect a lot of phone calls. Unfortunately, there's probably going to be a lot of tire kickers, is what we call them. And these are people who, they have big dreams on what they want to do. We encourage people who have those big dreams. We work with them to try to figure out if they are going to be fit for being a farm business owner. So for you, you can expect a lot of contacts if your property is one that is going to be really interesting to someone. I typically will have people tell me if they want to have their information put on the website, whether it is their phone number or their email. Some people are not okay with having their information put on the website, and that's perfectly fine. In Maine, I offer to be the point of contact where I just simply shuffle the information back and forth. We're not involved in any of the negotiations. We are not allowed to do that legally. We are not a real estate agency, so that's not allowed legally. So that's something that you can think about too. If that's one thing that you've been a little bit nervous about, is connecting with people. If you have email, sometimes I suggest that's a great first way of getting that first initial contact out. You can ask a few questions, they can ask a few questions, you can answer. And then if you feel like you want to move forward with talking with them, you can then set up either a phone conversation, maybe a farm visit, whatever makes sense for the situation. So that's something that you need to think about and should think about before you actually get the information out on one of the websites, is how you're going to go forward with actually talking to people. the first few, you may not have great success. You might feel it's really awkward to talk to somebody. You're not really sure what to say or how to answer them. Maybe they don't know the right questions to ask. It's okay. Those happen all the time. It's all part of the process. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. We get these things out, and you just learn more by talking to people.
So someone asked a question in the chat about whether landowners should ask farmers to see their business plan. So obviously Maddie and Sue, of course you can chime in, but I think knowing that a farmer has a sound business plan is an important part of a lease negotiation, because you want to know that you have a reliable person who's using your property. Sue or Maddie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think.
can.
Go ahead, Maddie. No fighting.
I'll chime in real quick. I know with Connecticut FarmLink, and we have some differing questions with profiles across New England, but in Connecticut specifically, we do ask if they have a business plan. And if they don't, we send them resources on business plan tools that they can look at. So I don't think it's off-putting at all, Tom. I think that that's a great question. And I think that it's very important in establishing trust and leasing your land or selling it to someone.
I agree 100%. On the flip side of that, you also have to think about there are people who are going to be coming. They may want to purchase a piece of property to farm it, but they may not be doing it in a business capacity. They may be doing it at a homestead capacity. So that would just definitely be one question that you can ask. Are you looking to do a business? Do you have a solid business plan? Or are you looking to do this, come onto this land as a homestead? So learning what information farmers are looking for, and you can add it at any time. If you have a lot of questions about your property that you didn't think about, whether it is questions about your barn, or how many open acres versus how many wooded acres, or whatever the scenario is, we typically can add the information to your posting at any time. We encourage it, getting some updated information, ruffle up the posting, maybe bring it to the top, those are all good things. So anytime you can add information or bustle up that information, we welcome it.
I also don't know how it is in the other states, but I'm completely open to getting phone calls from landowners. Sometimes it can be really overwhelming when you first make a posting with the amount of people that reach out to you. Farmers are really eager to get on land sometimes, and especially during certain times of the year, it's a little bit of a crisis. If you reach out to your FarmLink associate in your state, I'm sure they would be helpful and be able to help you navigate that process, or even connect you to someone that they think might be looking for land that might be a good match for you. So feel free to reach out, guys.
Thanks, Maddie. That's a great segue into just a few links for our resources. As I said before, Land for Good is one of the wonderful resources that I always connect folks with. Connecticut has their own resource page on their website. Here in Maine, we have a resource page on our FarmLink website, but we also have a whole separate collaboration of ag service providers here in Maine, part of the Maine Farmer Resource Network. Everything from farmland access to finding funding, soils information. It's a plethora. It is an amazing place to go look through. You can even do some testing on there to see if, you could do some self-testing and find out if what you're looking to do is the right fit for you. It's just a great place. And then Vermont Land Link is the other one, and they have their own resources as well. So those are 4 places that I highly recommend you could find probably an answer to whatever your question is. Outside of reaching out to one of us, we are always here to help.
Yeah, I will echo that. Those resource sections are really super valuable and have lots of information about tax things that you will never have even thought of. The resource sections we'll mention on Connecticut FarmLink. I know our resource section is very extensive. We also have on the Connecticut resource section a checklist of what we recommend landowners and farmers take a look at before making a posting. It could be helpful for anybody across New England, but things like business planning and town local laws and such like that. So feel free to check that out as well. And now I think we're going to open it up for questions. If you guys have any questions, I know we have a part 2 coming up next week that's really going to be focused on answering questions more on like leasing agreements. But if you have any questions on what it is that farmers are looking for or how to make a posting on a FarmLink website, feel free to leave them in the chat and we'd be happy to answer anything. Also, feel free to unmute if that feels more comfortable, but no pressure.
I'll ask a question. This is Rob. I'm a new landowner. So I just leased my property for the first time a few years ago. And we had just a tremendous experience because the farmers, the first year was fine. And in fact, I was doing a lot of free labor for them because of the pandemic. The second year, they started accusing us of hacking their phones, killing their cats, spying on them with cameras, all sorts of crazy stuff. And basically we have to pay them now to leave early to break the lease just because they're so abusive and just literally crazy. My family doesn't feel comfortable with them coming because the property is attached to our house. So I was just wondering if you have any suggestions for someone who would like to rent again, but it's sort of been burnt once and a little bit shy about that.
I will lead off with this and Sue, feel free to chime in. That sounds like a really horrible situation. And I hope everyone on the call realizes that that is not a normal situation.
Yeah.
I've never heard of something quite as intense as that. And I'm so sorry for that experience. Yeah, so Rachel left in the chat, ask for references. That could be a good way to make sure that you feel reassured that the next person that's going to lease you know, has similar ethics to you and also is trustworthy. Yeah, Sue, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, other than, again, I would hope that you had a legal agreement and having that set up in a way that, you know, gives the opportunity for the landlord to be able to evict if those types of things are happening. I'm assuming each state would probably have different laws around rental agreements or lease agreements.
Yeah, I'll just, so we did have a basic lease, and I'll just say this was the issue that because Massachusetts is very lease friendly and we had to get a lawyer, and he said, basically, you're going to spend so much more on legal fees. You're better off just paying them, you know, basically a ransom to leave early just because you'll save more money than you would in legal fees.
Wow.
And negotiate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, so that, but I've actually posted it on Land for Good a few months ago, but haven't had a single person contact me since. So I'm kind of surprised that, I guess maybe I need to put it somewhere else.
You could do that, or you could reach out and see what you could get for information about the property that might be not on there and what you could gain for interest. You know, maybe it's a kind of skinny on the information as far as the farmer would want to know. And if you could boost that information a little bit, that might get you a little bit more interest.
Sure.
Or adding some photos or a soils map can be really helpful.
Yeah.
When farmers are looking through, sometimes if there's no photos, they don't feel very inspired. I know when I see
Agreed.
a gorgeous pasture, I feel very inspired. So make sure if you guys are able to get some photos up with your listing, it's really helpful. All right.
I just wanted to put out this, sorry, everybody, this is Shemariah Blum-Evis, and I'm with Land for Good also. And I couldn't help but jump in on this question about when there are challenges that come up, and want to make everybody aware of the agricultural mediation programs that exist. And they vary from state to state, but I did drop in the chat a link to a directory for the different states where they exist. And one of the services they offer is typically no cost assistance with leases. So that can be where you're having challenge either establishing a lease or if a lease is in place and there is conflict, and they can help offer no cost mediation. Both sides have to volunteer and participate, but it is an option that's available to folks. And just wanted to let you know, and also to reinforce that there's a lot of resources and information that we're sharing in the chat that we'll make sure will be going out via email after this also.
So we have a couple questions around the theme of how to establish land value or lease value specifically based on infrastructure or housing. Tom, it seems like you've been thinking about, you know, all it is that you're offering for the farmer. So that's great. It really depends on the situation. Sue, I don't know if you have any standards that you reference for people when talking about lease value. No.
We don't typically try to get involved in that. It's just we don't have the capacity to do that. We would typically send people on to the USDA, the Farm Service Agency, specifically the one in whatever county here in Maine the property would be. They have a little better handle on that. So that's typically where we would send people.
And I usually send people to the Land for Good agent that works in Connecticut, and they could be a great resource as well.
I've also had luck in looking at land lease prices. I'm based in Michigan, and talking to the local Michigan State University extension schools in the areas, and there are different, you know, farm bureaus. And so you can get kind of a wide range. And a lot of times, depending on where you're buying farmland, like where we are, it's actually in an area that was traditionally agricultural that's now quickly developing into upscale vacation areas. The delta between the actual land value and the lease cost is tremendous. So I would recommend it's not something to be doing to necessarily generate profit in those areas. It's just more to keep the agricultural integrity of the area. But my question there was more about, like, if, you know, maybe there are other resources you could point me to, if beyond providing a long-term low-cost lease, we're also helping to invest in the, you know, starting of an operation. When people who invest in farm operations, what, like, the rates of return they typically expect is like 4% a year on their money, more or less. And so any resources that you would recommend just to kind of get a sense of like market rates would be great.
There's not anything that I can think of off the top of my head. I can think about that a little bit more and look at our research section and send that information your way.
Yeah, even any credit unions that are lending to farmers, because I think that's like a good, you know, rate right there to try to beat or come in lower than, you know, the rate that they would have to go to get like a, you know, commercial mortgage at.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can add some of that information into the resources that we send after this.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for bringing up extension services. Also are great resources in Connecticut. The extension services can provide lots of information from professionals, and it can be invaluable. Any other questions? All right.
I'm just wondering.
Go for it.
Sorry, Maddie. I'm just wondering if any folks who are farmers currently, or farmers approaching retirement, or farmers who recently retired, if any of that crew on the call have specific questions about making your land or part of your land available to the younger generation.
So we have a question from Tim Sue that says, in your work with farmland owners, what are some of the most common areas of support you provide? Or looked at another way, are there common challenges faced by many farmland owners? And how do you help them work through those common challenges? So what are the common challenges that farmland owners face?
Finding somebody to farm their land. That's a common one. Another common one might be a succession plan to know what they're going to do with the property. Perhaps they do not have family who's going to take over their farming business. If it's already a farming business, perhaps it's a thriving dairy here in Maine, and their next generation is not interested in taking over. So that's where we would help them, you know, figure out what they want to see happen on the land, whether they want to see it protected with some type of a conservation easement. Perhaps they don't. it doesn't fit everybody's circumstances. But then figuring out who would be the best fit for that piece of property, knowing that they have put their blood, sweat, and tears into that property. It is their retirement. So we see both sides of the coin, where we understand it is the landowner's investment that they have put, their blood, sweat, tears, and every penny they have into that property, and they need to get a financial return for it, which we understand. But then seeing where a new beginning farmer or a farming transitioning up farmer is looking to go onto a piece of property, they may not be able to afford the property in the category of what the landowner needs or would like to get. So that's where the struggle and that little bit of a disconnect sometimes happens, but we do the best we can. Protecting the property in Maine with the agricultural easement and our purchase easement program, that's one way that we help offset the costs for a piece of property. So that's one way that we help support both the landowners and the land seekers.
It looks like Bo has a question.
Hi, Bo.
Hey y'all, I'm Bo. I'm the beginning farmer specialist at MAFCA. I have a question both as a service provider and as a farmer who's going to start leasing part of my farm to another farmer. I am seeing a trend more of beginning farmers incubating on existing farms that plan to continue existing for many years. And it helps reduce the barrier to capital investments of infrastructure to actually share that infrastructure. But I'm curious about the balance and navigating those tricky negotiations in regards to, okay, so you both need the wash pack at the same time, or you're trying to share tractors, and how, if there are successes of that model, if you'd be willing to share like how that is spelled out in leases and things like that. So farms can incubate and coexist on, the same land plot.
Oh, that's a great question. I can't say that I necessarily have any experience in that myself. I'm not sure if Maddie does. I do know of some incubator models, which I'm sure you probably are familiar with some of the same ones here in Maine. So I don't know if maybe reaching out to some of those and figuring out if they have any language in their leases that would be beneficial. But I certainly, if I can poke around and find something for you, I certainly would share that with you. Maddie,
I
do you have
do not
anything?
have many examples of incubator farms like you're describing. We have a lot of farmers that are looking, and landowners and farmers that own the land in Connecticut that are looking to partner with a farmer and then eventually sell the property to the farmer is something that I am seeing as a trend. And that can be a difficult process, making sure that the farmer has the same goals for the property, and the landowner is going to want them to, continue the goals that they've been striving for. So finding the right person is really the difficult part, and is the difficult part for, finding a farmer in general on your property. And a lot of that just takes some patience and some gentle communication to make sure everyone's on the same page. But yeah, patience is something that I definitely would recommend.
I'll chime in also.
Yeah.
And, just to say that what we have also seen is writing specifically in a lease, a communication plan. How often, how is communication going to work? Who are key contacts that will be there? How often will communication happen? That can be a section that is in a lease. We've also seen, not necessarily in a lease, but referenced in a lease, and then added as addendums, maybe a water management plan. How are things that can be updated more frequently than the leases? So a lease might reference, we're going to use share water according to our water management plan, and then have a water management plan that's separate that can be updated more frequently based on how things are going, and you can have and stipulate in there who has access to water when, who's paying who for what. Any shared infrastructure can have separate agreements like that. There might be a wash pack station, but wash and pack that is shared, or greenhouses that are shared. So you want to think through all of those different pieces, and some of that shows up in a lease and sometimes shows up in different agreements. But a well thought out situation will include all of those different elements.
Thank you, Shima.
Yeah.
All right. We have a question about grant opportunities or resources available to support landowners looking to turn non-farmland or forest into farmland. I know that that's going to differ depending on what state you're located in. I know in Connecticut, we have some grant opportunities around farmland restoration that probably could apply for that. We have another question about suggestions for finding nonprofits that want to rent farmland. That's a great question. We do a lot of outreach in Connecticut to nonprofits to see if they have land to rent, and that will then be listed on the FarmLink websites. So checking in with your local FarmLink that applies to your area would be my suggestion. Sue, anything else to add? No.
Sorry, I can never find my unmute button. Yeah, just reaching out to your local FarmLink program is probably going to be your best bet.
Awesome. So we have two more parts to this series. One's going to be next Wednesday, and then the following Wednesday we'll be having a discussion with farmers and landowners that have matched or just been on FarmLink programs. So any other questions that you may have that you think of in the next week or so, you'll be able to ask in the next following webinars as well. So no pressure, everyone.
So we'll send tomorrow a follow-up email to this session with a link to the recording if you want to watch it again, with some resources provided by Maddie and Sue, and with the information for next week's session. And then just like this week, then we'll send another reminder email prior to next Wednesday, so that you won't have to stress out too much about trying to keep track of things in your email inbox. If you have any questions between now and then, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us at any time. We're happy to answer your questions or help you explore thoughts. And we can stick around for the next 11 minutes for folks that still want to hang out and chat and ask questions. Thank you so much for joining us. It was really, really an honor to have so many of you here today.